But why don't we start with Ed Farrell? Hi.
Thank you. Chairwoman Kruger, Weinstein, thank you for the opportunity. I'm Ed Farrell. I'm the Executive Director of the Retired Public Employees Association. We represent the interest of retired state and local government former employees, and there's nearly 500,000 of us in the state retirement system. So we're in your district, you know who we are. I thank you for the support you've shown in the prior years. I want to talk about two issues today, and you're not going to hear this from anyone else, so it's very important. One has to do with the COLA, the cost of living adjustment that retirees receive. When the COLA was enacted 23 years ago, you may or may not know this, but it's not a real COLA. It's half a COLA. And it could never be less than 1% nor higher than 3%. Over time, the value of the pension benefit that people receive has gone down dramatically. And you're probably not aware, but 24% of the retirees in the state and local retirement system have a pension under $10,000. And nearly half of them have a pension less than $20,000. So there have been bills in the past to say, well, let's raise the point at which the COLA applies, which is $18,000. Let's raise that to $21,000. But for these folks who are getting a $10,000 pension, raising the amount at which the COLA is applied is not going to help them. And these folks need help. And what we've proposed, come up with, is a way to what we call a catch-up provision. That if you went back to when the COLA was enacted 23 years ago and said, well, what if you got the real COLA, but it could never be higher than 3%? We're not going to bust the bank, but if it were to be 4%, you would get the max of 3. But for the most part, the COLA has run about 1.3, 1.4%. And if your pension is under $10,000, getting a 1% increase is not going to help you much. These folks need help. And there's a lot of them. And we've come up with this catch-up provision to help them. So, we also propose raising the cap from 18 to 21. The catch-up provision applies only to current retirees. It would be a one-time calculation. If you raise the threshold from 18 to 21, that applies to everyone going forward. The other issue I want to raise, it has to do with access to skilled nursing facilities for retirees in the Empire Plan. You're probably aware of this, but because there was a bill that was enacted last year, all of you voted for it. It passed unanimously in each house. So I know. I call this to your attention. It's really important. The bill's been reintroduced. It's Senator Breslin, John McDonald. We hope that you include funding for this in your one-house budget resolutions. And finally, we support the proposal that Barbara has regarding the MC, the retirees.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Ed, I want to say to you, any retiree that's making $10,000, we should be helping. So I want to support that, just to say that, what salary they got years ago and not catching up, it's really, we're just promoting the poverty.
Correct.
And for all the
Thank
service
you.
they gave us to be a retiree, I want to just know that I'm supportive of those initiatives and just help to bring them forward.
Thank you. 30 some odd years ago, salaries were much lower. And, your final average salary and your pension was $10,000 or less.
In 1986, when I first worked for the Department of Sanitation, I made $17,000, so.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Senator.
Ed, what are you hearing, even though you're dealing with the Retired Public Employees Association?
Senator, I can tell you that retirees have zero conversations about this.
They're gone.
Okay, this is for the Retired Public Employee Association. In your testimony, the pension cost of living speaks to catching up to the annual cap of 3% for the current eligible retirees.
Correct.
What is the impact to the state of New York fiscally to fill this potential budget ask for the retirees? Additionally, will our current inflation rate have a subsequent impact on the cost of living increase for the retirees?
This proposal that I talked about was actually in print at the end of last session, and it had a fiscal note. So the fiscal note from the retirement system put the catch-up provision at $107 million, which is peanuts when you consider the pension fund is $242 billion.
Okay, and the second part of the question?
Which was,
Will
our
cover
proposal
inflation.
still has the 3% cap. Only one time in the history of the COLA did it ever reach 3%, and that was this year. That's because inflation was 9%. You know, so we got 3. It's the only time in the history of the COLA that we've gotten 3%. For the most part, we've gotten, on average, 1.5%.
So will it have an impact on the inflation rate? Will it have a subsequent impact on the cost of living increase
Well,
for retirees?
The 3% cap remains in place. So if inflation drops down to 8% instead of 9%, we would still only get 3%. So there have been 2 times in the history where actually the rate of inflation was less than 1%. And the retirees got a bit of a boost because we got the 1% as opposed to 0.5%. So
Got it.
it's in there, but if you leave the guardrails in there with the 1% floor and the 3% ceiling, none of that changes.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And Ed, when we talk about retirees, $10,000, are we talking about people who have put in their 20 or 30 hours years in
Yes.
state service, full-time employees at the end of their retirement, and then only qualifying for $10,000 in pension? Are we at that point? Are we dealing with majority of those people in your example being part-timers who put in their 10 years and then moved on to the private sector? Where is that range? Because they would still qualify for a pension.
You have to be able to qualify for the pension. So if you're part-time, you can't put in 10 years, you'd have to put in 20 years, you know, to have your 10 years.
Well, then let's say it's 20 years as
Yeah.
a part-timer. I'm just
These
trying
are
to
folks.
contextualize.
These are real people who, because their salary was so low when they were working 30 years ago, that when their pension was calculated,
Don't
this
get
is a
me-
quarter
don't-
of the people in the
don't get-
retirement
Don't get
system.
me wrong. I'm not questioning
Yeah.
that. I'm trying to contextualize the nature of those people, whether this was their full-time job or these are people who had a full-time job outside, because we have many people who work part-time in the public sector. That's all. I wanted to
Yeah.
clarify that.